Hey everyone, I'm Mitch. I'm one of the pastors here, and you are watching Suncrest on Demand, specifically episode 1 of a series of messages we're calling Keep the Change. Let's get going.
I know a lot of us, you just sit and listen. That's awesome. But today, particularly for this message, if you open the Suncrest app and hit message notes, you'll get a chance to walk through that together. You can keep using this QR code if that's helpful to you to get the app. You can even download it and kind of mess with it. I'm telling a couple opening stories tonight. It's perfectly fine. The thing about the function that happens in this app, among many other things that are awesome in the app, is you can actually fill out the blanks on the message notes and then email those to yourself. And there's a couple choices I'm going to ask you to make that you can only make for yourself tonight, and I want you to email those to yourself when you're done. It shows up as a PDF in your email. It's a really cool function in the app, and just like we always say when we promote it, according to 17 people, it's the best app in the App Store. So it's actually 33 people now, 5-star reviews across all platforms. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that. I have a question for you as I start this series tonight, and this is not something to say out loud or raise your hand, just something for you to think about. This is my question. Are you a generous tipper? Are you a generous tipper? And you might think yes, you might think no, I don't do that. You might be embarrassed if you would say no, but you're not going to say it out loud, but you know it's true inside. And whenever I ask someone the reason for why they are or why they aren't a generous tipper, I never get like an explanation. I always get a story. Something happened and they became either a generous tipper or not a generous tipper. I am a generous tipper, and I have a story for it. The story for it is I married a girl who was a waitress. That's basically how this has worked. When Jenny and I started dating, I was 17 years old. She was 15 years old. Yeah. And this is small town Illinois. Her parents owned the restaurant that was across the street from the church that I went to. And my family would go out to lunch at that restaurant after church every weekend. And you can imagine how awkward it would be if you're Jenny, like you're the girlfriend of me, but you have to wait on the table with my brothers and my dad and my mom and everyone there. She, of course, was fantastic, except I will tell you, one time she was waiting on our table and she had ice water in her left hand and iced tea in her right hand. And while she was pouring the iced tea in my dad's glass, she poured the ice water down my brother's back, which was awesome. A memory we talk about many, many times over. But my wife would tell me way back then, she'd say, it's so interesting to see who tips and who doesn't. And like many people I run into in the service industry, there's a little bit of a notion that Christians are the worst. Christians are the worst. Christians are the most stingy, but I think they should be the most generous. And it's actually that part of the story that's caused me to say, I want to be a generous tipper. Just this past week, I heard a story about a guy. You'll understand he lives in the South when I tell this story here in just a little bit. But this is so fascinating to me. He was telling a group something he does every Thanksgiving. He said he would load up his kids in the car every Thanksgiving morning, and he would drive to Waffle House. That's how you know it's in the South, right? And he would go to Waffle House, and Thanksgiving morning at Waffle House is a relatively quiet time. Waffle House is open, 24 hours a day, most every day of the year, maybe every day of the year. But it's quiet in that morning. He would leave his kids in the car, and he would go into the Waffle House, and he would sit at the counter and order 1 cup of coffee. And he would sit there, and he would drink it pretty quickly, and then he would pay for it. And then he'd wait for the person who was working behind the counter, who he said, and you can imagine this, he said, the person working at Waffle House on Thanksgiving morning is almost always a single mom. Almost always a single mom. It's not someone who wants to work. It's someone who has to work. And he would pay for his coffee and then give her a chance to walk away. And then, after she had walked away, he would take 3 $100 bills out of his pocket and he'd slip them under the coffee cup and he'd set them there and he'd walk out. And then he'd go get in the car and he'd say, "Kids, watch this." And they would watch as the girl who was behind the counter, who oftentimes was a single mom, would come and look at that coffee cup and lift it, and like 1, 2, 3. He said she would always, every year, they always do the same thing. He's like, they look around. Like, is this for real? Are there cameras on me? Whatever. It is for real. And then right in the Waffle House, that young woman will do a happy dance, right? And do it right there. And he said, I just wanted my kids to see that every single year. And he's like, it was so much joy. She was doing a happy dance in there. We were doing a happy dance in the van, and it was so, so good. And when I tell that story, I actually think it's probably the perfect setup for where I want to go with this series. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if you think, man, I would love to do that. I'd love, you know what, I am going to do that this Thanksgiving. $300 under the coffee cup, bless somebody who wasn't expecting it and definitely needs it more than I do. I'm going to do it. But here's the idea. Keep the Change, the name of this series, is about freedom and formation in your finances and in mine. What do I mean by that? Freedom. The scriptures have a vision for how to construct our financial lives that make our financial lives places of joy and peace rather than stress. They cast a vision that life financially can be full of freedom if you have enough margin. If you happen to have $300 extra and you want to bless someone on Thanksgiving morning, you now have the freedom to do so. That's one of the visions for the scriptures. And I hope before we're done in this 3-week series, you will feel yourself like if you don't feel freedom right now, you'll be on the path to some freedom. And second, it's about formation. So if freedom is the ability to say to someone at a restaurant, hey, keep the change. I don't need it, keep the change. I have the financial freedom to do that, keep the change. Formation is the taking of this phrase and saying, this will be lasting change. I will decide certain things over the next 3 weeks. And after I make those decisions, I'll start plotting my way toward them. And I will end up in a place where it's not just an idea I had or something I wish I did, but I actually could come about change that stays. I keep the change in my life. And I really, really want us to think about that. Now, for me, the most fascinating subject in the whole world is the notion of how people truly change. One of the things I noticed as a pastor early on, you probably noticed this in your lives, is many people think they experienced change. They have like a moment, an aha, a big thing, and it feels like a change. But unfortunately, 3 weeks later or 3 months later, they're just back to where they were before. And what's fascinating to me is how people actually change in a way that lasts over the long term. Our mission as a church is to be used by God to change lives. That's at the center of everything that we do. One of our kind of catchphrases we use is change happens here. And I've seen it happen so many times in people's lives, like real change happens. In 2014, when I had the chance for a sabbatical, I had 3 months away from my role here at the church. And in addition to getting to experience some really cool things, I was seeking out the answer to one question. And the question was, how do people really change? And thanks to a very generous grant from an endowment in Indianapolis, I got the chance to go all over the world and ask that question. I asked people in Liberia, Africa, who don't have 2 nickels to rub together, who live in poverty all the time, about change in their lives. I asked people in Europe, where tradition is strong and rooted in history, and asked them about change in their lives. I was in Myanmar, which is a military-driven society where people have very little freedom at all, and I talked to them about change in their lives. And it was interesting to me to see, oh, this is how change actually comes about. And I'm going to talk to you about this financially, but I want to live just a little larger picture with us together so we can understand how change really happens. The process to any change in our lives has 3 things really. The first is desires. Flippantly, someone might say, you know what? People are just going to do whatever they want. And I have found that in my observations to be 100% true. That you're going to do in your life whatever you want to do. Sometimes you would say, whatever you frickin' want to do, right? And I'm going to do in my life whatever I want to do. Almost never, and I think never over the long term, do we actually do something we don't want to do. Now, this is very simple, right? And until you're about 5 years old, that's a very basic thing in your life. You just reach for whatever you want. But once you get past 5, you can appreciate that there's competing desires in our lives. We want this, but we also want this, and if we can't have it, then we have to decide what we want more. And this is a key, if you could think about it, to actually enacting change in your life, is to get to the place where you change your desire. I actually want that. I got an offer this past year from someone I respect. He owned a Corvette, and he was going to sell it to me. He wanted to sell it to me. And it was one of those things where he was going to sell it to me at a great price for like its market value, but it still was not a low price for me. And you could ask me the question, Greg, did you want the Corvette? And the answer to that question is yes, I wanted the Corvette. There is a desire inside of me to be like, that would be cool. I would be cool if I could drive around in a Corvette, right? Did I buy the Corvette? I did not buy the Corvette. Why didn't I buy the Corvette? This is as simple as it gets, and it's true in your life also. It's because I want something else even more than I want the Corvette, the deeper desire. Now, many of you know, I drive a minivan, which now has 306,000 miles on it, right? Do you think I want a Corvette? Yes, I want a Corvette. You might think Greg has some spiritual reason for why he wants the minivan more than the Corvette. I have no spiritual reasons for that. What I have is, I like bragging about my minivan. That's what I have. I like telling you that I drive a minivan. I want to drive a minivan that has 400,000 miles on it. You might think that's a sadistic desire on my part, and maybe it is. But I actually want that more than I want the Corvette. And desires work this way. Young marriages work this way. Sometimes second and third marriages finally figure this out. You know, when you get married, what do you want? You want to be happy. And almost always, it could be 6 months into marriage, could be 6 years into marriage. You look up one day and you're like, I'm not sure I'm happy. And you want to be happy. It's a desire inside of you. But there's something about maturity, and actually about the promise you made and the vow you took, that says, wait, yes, I want to be happy. But actually what I want even more is for him to be happy. Or for her to be happy. This isn't actually about me. If marriage is about you, you're doing it wrong. And you have this kind of deeper desire, and it shifts things. And people who have long, happy marriages over time become that way because their desire for the other person to be happy more than they would be happy causes it to work that way. These are just deeper desires. Spiritual struggles in our lives are essentially this. We want to honor God. We want to. But we want other things too. And whatever the deeper desire is, do I really want to honor God more than I want to do this thing that doesn't honor him? Whichever one you want to do more, you will do it. That's the way change works. Whatever your deepest desire is. So it means we have to change our desires. That's the path to change. Second thing you have to do to change anything in your life is to embrace reality. Let me just tell you the story real quick. I had a guy in my office this week, and the reason he was in my office is that he was confessing to me that he had committed adultery. And as he told me the story, it became very obvious to me that this hour that he and I had together, I think is going to bring about lasting change. Because this was not the first time he had committed adultery. It's not the first time a relationship went south because of decisions that he made. But the previous times that he had done it in past years, he deflected it. He blew it off. He blamed the other person. He said, it's just the way I am. He had some reason or some excuse or some justification for why he did what he did. But when he sat in my office this week and we looked each other in the eye, he was just broken. And I wasn't really prone to say, it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. And I really wanted him to sit with the reality as it is. Face it. Look under the rocks, even when you're afraid what you're going to find under the rocks, and deal with reality as it is. Because if you just blow off, cover up, blame someone else, or deflect or justify your reality, you'll never change. Never change. But my respect, though he had committed adultery, grew for him in that hour. And I listened to him pray a prayer of confession to God. It was telling the truth about what he'd done and facing the consequences for it, and describing to me not only that he had done something wrong, but the hell it put his partner through. And I think until you do that, nobody changes. You have to embrace the realities. And then when you set the path, this is what's so interesting to me. You choose an approach to change of either evolution or revolution. Right? Now let me describe this. This is not complicated. You want something different, you define reality, and then you set your course to change. And there are genuinely two paths to change, and it's not that one is right and one is wrong. They're just different, and you have to choose your course. Sometimes evolution is the best path to change. It's small, it's incremental, it's step by step, and though you may not experience something dramatic at the beginning, over a year's time or 2 years' time, life can really be different. And sometimes you look at a situation and say, no. This isn't about small steps over the next year or two. This is not about evolution. This is about revolution. It stops today. I start something else today. Now, when I start to describe these, almost everyone thinks, well, why wouldn't you do revolution? Why wouldn't you do revolution? And the answer is, in revolutions, people die. Like when you make drastic changes, a lot of times there's collateral damage along the way, and you really have to gauge, is it better to do revolution or evolution? And one of the most fascinating articles that I read about change was in a magazine called Fast Company, and it was describing how oftentimes if you get traction in an evolutionary change where it's step by step over time, that is the best path to lasting change. However, the place that you trip up is that if you don't do something significant enough on the front end to see the difference it makes in your life, you will give up on the evolutionary change instead of sticking with it. This is so obvious all over the scriptures. I'm just going to show you one quick example. In the book of Acts, the church had begun. Peter was preaching a sermon, and it's so fascinating. The people who were listening to him says they were cut to the heart. They felt like they wanted to change. They had defined their reality. They were embracing what was true. They had a deep desire. So what do we do, Peter? And this is so fascinating. He says, revolution. Right here, right now, repent and be baptized, every one of you. And about 3,000 of them were added to the number that day. About 3,000 people were baptized on the spot. They walked into the room not thinking they probably weren't in the room, they were probably outside, but they walked up not thinking they would be baptized. And when called upon to do it, it's like, I'm all in, revolution, let's go. It's beautiful. It's actually, this is a fascinating story to me, because many times when I talk to people about baptism, I think baptism is a revolution step. But unfortunately, many people misunderstand it as an evolution step. They think, well, let me get these 4 things straight in my life yet, and then baptism will come sometime after. It's not like that. It's I'm all in. It's a decision. It's a conviction. But then, after this same group of people was baptized and had a revolutionary experience and got the bolt of a start, then the scriptures say this. And then they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer every day. Just this evolutionary change. There's a commitment to growing the next day and then the next day and then the next day. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. And most healthy change in our lives works this way. It starts with a sense of revolution and a conviction, a decision in our heart and our soul that I'm drawing a line, I'm not going back, and I'm surging forward, but I have to be committed to the discipline and the evolution of change in our life. Now that could work for any part of life. That can work whether you're a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus. But for the rest of our time today, I want to ask you to think about this, particularly as it relates to your finances. And I don't know, as you're sitting here today, whether you feel like, yeah, I wish my finances were different than they are. But the scriptures actually kind of guide us through some ways to think about that and some decisions to make. And honestly, the next 12 minutes or so might even feel like a little bit of a workshop for you, and it's the part where the app is going to be really, really helpful. So let's just talk about this. Essentially, if you break it down, there are 5 financial activities that we do in our life. They fall into 5 categories: earning, borrowing, saving, giving, and spending. And I'm going to break this down in such a way that I think, each one of these you could ask yourself, do I need to make a change in my own life right now? And I'm really going to focus on the middle 3 here: borrowing, saving, and giving. So let me just talk for a moment about the first and the last. You might be in a place in your life where you think the change I need to make is on the earning side. And that might be a change because you need to earn more. And it's not an easy decision. It's going to mean you have to go back to school, but you still a couple decades in front of you, and it's going to be worth it, and you have to put in the work. Or you're saying, I'm going to have to take a second job. I have to do something to earn more than I am right now. And some of you, don't miss this, because change goes all directions. Some of you are in a spot where the healthy decision for you is to say, actually, I'm in a spot where I need to earn less. I've earned enough. And I keep focusing on earning, but it's time actually to stop focusing on earning more and more and more. Instead, I need to let some deeper desires, rather than just earning money, take place in my life. On the bottom one, there's the notion of spending, right? Now, spending in some sense encompasses all of our money. It's what we do with whatever money that we receive. And the reason I'm going to skip past this today is because when we talk about the other 3, it will no doubt intersect with spending. And the desires that you and I have to spend money, to go out to eat, to buy a new car, to buy a new shirt, to do whatever American consumers do, we like to spend. Whatever desires you and I have to spend, this is the very desire that we would say, yeah, that's a desire, but I have a deeper desire to do something else. Do I want my borrowing to change? Let's talk about borrowing. And remember, this is about desires. Do you want your borrowing to change? You might be in a place where you do or where you don't. If I could just say, hey, what do the scriptures say about this? The scriptures give one image about borrowing money, and this is the image in the book of Proverbs, great book of wisdom. The borrower is a slave. The borrower is the slave. That when you owe someone else money, that you are the slave. And I don't know how this feels to you. You might feel today like, I don't need to change my borrowing habits. But if your borrowing habits are in such a way that it feels like you're in chains, that you're enslaved, that you look at your financial life and you're like, because of my debt, I can't do the other things that I want. That's the whole image of this passage. And so, I just want to give you the chance. You can mark these boxes in your app. This question for borrowing. I don't know, for you, for each of us, borrowing. Is this something that doesn't need any change for you? Is it something that needs evolution for you? Or is it something that needs revolution for you? And I was talking to some financial planners that are in our church, and we were just trying to come up with some kind of basic frameworks. The examples I'm going to give over the rest of the message, they're not biblical examples. They're just kind of good everyday practices to help people think about things. You might want to figure out your own practices, but maybe these would be helpful to you. When it comes to borrowing, if you think, I want to make a change, well, the biggest category for sure is credit cards, right? And you might think, that's my box. And if you want to think, is it evolution or is it revolution? You know that if you've stacked up credit cards, how high that interest is, feel like you never get out of it, that's one of those places where you have to say, listen, I want something more than this. I'm willing to say, yeah, I'm in a tough spot. It's embarrassing, actually, for people oftentimes to admit that they have credit card debt. And that embarrassment actually keeps them from embracing the reality of it. But then you have to choose. Say, hey, maybe today, this third weekend in May, 2023, is the end of digging my hole of credit card debt. And life could be different. It could actually be what I want if I make that change. And so I'm going to encourage you, even in that app, to fill in the blank and say, well, how many How long would it take me to do that? Now, if you're married, of course, you need to have this conversation with your spouse. If you're not married, I'd still encourage you to have this conversation with somebody that you trust for encouragement and for accountability. How long would that take? Another big category that I hear about debt is student loan debt. It's so interesting to me. With student loans, you invested in an education. I hear the story all the time that people are like, I didn't realize how much was stacking up. I'm overwhelmed by the amount that's there. And you're not going to be able to take care of that all in one swoop. But to say, you know what? I feel like a slave right now. I feel like I'm in chains by this debt. And that is not a sense of freedom. If I want to put $300 under a coffee cup, I can't do it because of the student loan. And so I'm going to embrace that reality. And either evolutionary or revolutionary, I'm going to make my way out of this. And of course, you can't make your way out of it without making difficult decisions. It might mean taking on the second job, or when the bonus comes, it all goes to that instead of the fun. That's the very nature of this life. But the sense is, I desire to get free from these chains more than I desire spending that money that comes in on something else. This was an interesting framework to me. I'll just use it with you real quick. When it comes to borrowing, sometimes this is about just taking on future debt. And one of the frameworks that came out of a few conversations I had was that this may be a good way to think about it. Would I make a commitment today not to take on future debt, and in particular, not to take it on if the interest rate is higher than 5%, or if I can't put at least half the money down? You might be thinking about a car loan or something else. And there's just a lot of wisdom when my friends were telling me about this. They said, think about this, Greg. Someone takes out a $30,000 car loan for 5 years, and it's 7.5% interest. On top of the cost of the car, they're going to pay $6,000 in interest over that 5 years. But if you could decide, you know what, I'm going to put half the money down. I got $15,000, and I'm going to only have 4% interest. And the interest is only about $1,400. It's just that significant of a difference as you go forward. And again, this may not be the framework for you, but it's at least something to talk about, to think about. Say, maybe this would be a change. So borrowing. I'm just curious in the room, not raise your hand, just in your heart, to say, hey, is this weekend potentially a marker weekend to say things change for your borrowing? Second, let's talk about saving. Do I want my saving or my investing practices to change? Do I want them to change? Because this has to be a deeper desire than anything else going on in your life right now, so that you could actually move this direction. The scriptures really think highly of putting away some responsible saving. This is the way the scriptures talk about it. They say, the wise man saves for the future. The foolish man spends all that he gets. The wise man has some money in the bank, and it's all about saving for the future. And you think, well, what's in the future? And the answer is, what's in the future are things that are both known and unknown. Some of this is just wise planning, so that when you get into the future and there's something that comes up that you cannot expect, you're not ill prepared for it. And some of it is to say, man, if I'm ever going to really tackle the dream that I have financially, I'm going to have to prepare myself now, saving for the future. It's interesting, the Bible is a big fan of compounded interest. It says, let me go back. That passage didn't show up in there. Anyway, the Bible tells you, let me read it to you. I got it in my notes here. Whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. No get-rich schemes. I just heard this, I was watching a financial program this week. You save $100 a month until you retire, and you started at age 25, you'd have $1 million. If you save $100 a month until you retire, but you started at age 35, you'd have $300,000. It's just the difference of time. And if you gather little by little, over time, it grows. So, for us, this is my question for each person in the room. From a savings standpoint, for you, you think, no, I'm good on that. No change for me. Or like, yeah, I got to change. And will it be evolution or will it be revolution? And then let me give you just a few frameworks that, these financial planners share with me. They say, one of the things you should have is a $2,000 emergency fund. In today's world, if you don't have a $2,000 emergency fund, you can get sunk or end up back in that credit card debt just like that. And so just at the most basic level, the first step of saving is to say, hey, I have $2,000 in the bank, and it's an emergency fund. There's a saying that I love. It says, if you have a problem that money will solve, and you have money, you don't have a problem. If you have a problem that money will solve, and you have money, you don't have a problem. If you have a problem that money will solve, and you don't have money, then you got a problem. And just having a little bit of a buffer, just that first step of $2,000 in the savings account, some of you are like, that's crazy, I have way more than that. Good for you. Some of you are underneath on this and like, no, that's my step. The second one is to say, actually a little bigger emergency fund. How about 3 months salary? Whatever your salary is, make sure that 3 months of it's in the bank. What would happen if I lost my job, if something catastrophic happened, if someone died? Are we prepared to move forward? And if something happens in that way, am I going to become a burden to loved ones? Or could I be a person who can navigate that? Because the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends all he gets. And then sometimes savings, and I actually think this is probably the biggest thing, is about an upcoming event. And I don't know what the event is in your life. It could be, I would like to take a vacation, and it's going to cost $3,000. I'd like to buy a car, and it's going to cost $20,000. I'd like to save for my kids' college, and it's going to cost a lot more than that. I'd like to save for retirement. And I just think, I don't know if you've thought about this, but the scriptures, they just want to help you see. What's the thing you're saving for? And how much is it going to take? And say, that, I'm not doing it right now, but either in a revolution way or an evolution way, that changes today. Third category, giving. Do I want my giving to change? It's so interesting to me when I get the chance to talk to people, if they'll talk to me kind of candidly about their decisions about giving and how they handle certain things. The scriptures are crystal clear when they talk to us about our posture on giving. You'll appreciate this, I think. In 2 Corinthians, it says, each one of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver. Just as we are going to do whatever we want, the journey in giving is actually a journey of desire. God does not have any desire to be like, I'm going to take your arm, I'm going to shove it up behind your back so that you'll give. That's not it. The question is, do you want to be the kind of person who is generous? And are you generous? So, same thing for giving. For you, is no, I'm good. I'm good. I've come to the point that I want to be at in terms of my giving, and I'm good. Or is it no, I want to be a more generous person. I want to give. And is it evolution? It's going to take me a few years to get where I want to get. Or is it revolution, where someone would say, it's just time to do the right thing. Right here and right now, that's who I want to be. So I'm going all in and changing it here. And this is one of the frameworks we use. If you've been around here, you know this. Say, okay, well, what do you want? You want to be a rookie giver who's I haven't done this before, I'm going to try it. You want to be a recurring giver who says, no, my giving isn't random, and it's not just the first time. It's a habit for me. It's something regular. It's part of my everyday life. And for people who are recurring givers, the question is usually, hey, what can I afford that I want to give? Would you want to be a relational giver? And I use this phrase to make it foundational for your life, that everything else, that this comes first and everything else is built out on this foundation. I make the decision that I'm going to honor God and give in that way. And one of the frameworks the scriptures use for this is 10% of an income. Or do I want to even go beyond that and be a radical giver? To be the kind of person who would give far beyond 10% of my income. Because the whole orientation that I have with my money is that I want to love people and change the world. Those are the questions. And so, I know this feels a little bit like a workshop. But the reason I come back to this at least once every year is that change happens here. But there's no doubt there are people sitting in this room who heard a message like this 3 years ago, and they were buried in credit card debt, and they felt like they were handcuffed, and they didn't have their emergency fund, and it was all stress. It was no freedom. If they wanted to say keep the change, they couldn't even do it. And there wasn't a path to formation, but today life is not just different, better. Because they drew a line in the sand and said, no, it's going to change for us. And it did. And I just want to come back to a simple phrase that was in that last passage that I read to you, because I think this is the key to fundamental change in our lives. It says, they decided in their heart. Kind of an odd phrase if you think about it. Where do you make your decisions? Most people make them in their head. We think decisions are sourced in logic, and that's where decision-making happens. But to bring about real change in our lives, we make the decision in our heart. It is at a level of conviction. There's a sense, if you're a follower of Jesus, that God is leading me to this, and the Spirit will lead me through it. And I make it in such a way that today truly is a line in the sand. And life was one way before today. And then I decided in my heart. And life is different moving forward.
I want to let you know about a tool that we have here at Suncrest that can help you on your faith journey and help you connect with Suncrest. It's called the Suncrest app. You can have it on whatever mobile device you have, and it is a great tool to help connect you, your faith journey, to your real life. There's past messages, experience tools like message notes and our set lists, opportunities for you to give, and our calendar of events from all the way down to birth through adults. So I want to encourage you, download the Suncrest app if you're looking to connect with us and integrate your faith journey into your life.
Darkness run for cover, but the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. Oh, my praise belongs to you forever. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Oh, our God will story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony. From death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony.
Every week, we pause everything we do to focus on the love of Jesus through a time called communion. It's where in person we take bread and juice, and online take whatever food and drink you have available to you to remember the body of Jesus that was broken and his blood that was poured out for us in loving sacrifice. For those of us who follow Jesus, that fuels everything we do, which is so beautiful about it being food and drink. It fuels us. For those of us who maybe don't believe Jesus or say that we would follow Jesus yet, I want to invite you, instead of doing that, to pause and reflect on the idea that there is a God who knows you and wants to be with you and wants to help you live the kind of life that he lived. I'm going to put a timer on the screen here shortly, and you can feel free to eat and drink when you're ready or to reflect. Let's get going. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you know someone or your social media feeds could use this type of message, hit the share button on YouTube or Facebook. And if you want to see more content from Suncrest Church, hit the subscribe button on YouTube. I hope you join us next week for episode 2 of Keep the Change as we continue a practical guide towards financial freedom. But until we see you again, I hope that you experience change in your life through cultivating a trust relationship with God, connecting in life-changing relationships, contributing by serving, and caring about lost people. I hope you can experience the change that comes from living the kind of life that Jesus lived. We'll see you guys next time.